Good afternoon and welcome to everyone. This is our next installment of these EPRID monthly webinars. So welcome to all. We'll just wait for a few minutes as more people join. But anyway, some initial remarks from myself. My name is Alessandro Pecorari. I'm part of the board of coordinators of EPRID. I'm joined by my fellow colleague, Arie, who's also on the board. And we just want to welcome you to this webinar entitled The Global Exchange on Religion and Society, where we're going to be looking at this exciting and dynamic initiative led by the European Union to foster social inclusion and societal resilience for the global FoRB community. So we'll start off with just some initial remarks. I'll introduce our guest today. We're very, very excited to have Merete Bilde as our guest with a wealth of experience, as you will see when I introduce her. She is really has a wealth of knowledge, and we really welcome her presence today in order to understand a bit more about how the global exchange on religion and society works, its functions, and going forward, what also looking at the broader aspects of FoRB policy at the EU and specifically at the EEAS. And so Merete Bilde is a policy advisor at the European External Action Service. She works on issues at the cross-section of religion and foreign policy. This includes geopolitical aspects of religion, as well as cross-cultural religious relations. She has been involved in a number of networks of diplomats and faith-based political actors, meeting regularly in an effort to bridge the gap in understanding between religious and secular worldviews. She's the driving force behind the EEAS task force on religion and culture, as well as the EEAS training course on religion and foreign policy, with the aim to develop collective awareness and skill sets to appreciate the role of religion and its implication for diplomatic work. Ms. Bilde is one of the two co-founders of the Transatlantic Policy Network on Religion and Foreign Policy in 2015. And this policy network builds on a former EU-led like-minded group of diplomats working on the religion diplomacy nexus, which she herself set up in the mid-2000s. She has been engaged in various initiatives relating to issues such as freedom of expression, freedom of religion or belief, as well as the defamation debate. In the aftermath of the Arab Spring, her work has focused heavily on the new political actors and the new regional dynamics at play, including between the new Middle East and the US and Europe. Prior to her current appointment, Ms. Bilde worked in the policy unit of the EU High Representative Javier Solana, and before that, she served as a Danish diplomat. Ms. Bilde was a Bosch Public Policy Fellow at the Transatlantic Academy during its 2014-15 fellowship year, which focused on religion and its role in the liberal order. She wrote a short piece on the Brussels perspective on religion and diplomacy in the resulting publication, Faith, Freedom and Foreign Policy, Challenges for the Transatlantic Community. More recently, in 2020, Ms. Bilde was asked by the British Council and their Bridging Voices project to offer her reflections on dynamics and trends in transatlantic approaches, just as she was asked to give an interview to Religions for Peace on why faith matters, also in diplomacy. So as you will have seen, there is a wealth of knowledge here, and as I said, we're really excited to have Merete with us. So without further ado, Arie, I'll give you the floor and we can start the conversation.
Yeah, it's great to have you, Merete. We could talk with you for several hours to discuss all aspects of freedom of religion or belief and EU policy. But for today, we will focus on the global exchange on religion and society. That project or that program was launched in 2019, just before the European elections. And can you explain a little bit more for our audience what the vision behind the project is, so people help people understand why this project is such an important tool for the EEAS.
Thank you very much, and thank you to both of you. It's a pleasure to be with you and to get this chance to explain why we are quite enthusiastic about this initiative, which goes by the abbreviation GERAS. So GERAS was launched, as you mentioned, in 2019, but the idea for the project came couple of years before that. And it's actually important to underscore that this was HRVP Mogherini's own vision and she really gave us the mandate upon a visit to Indonesia, where she came back and told us, guys, you're holding out the microphone to the wrong people, those who use religion to fight, those who use religion to repress, to radicalize, etc. We should be looking at those who also use their way of living, their faith or non-faith, in collaboration with others to build bridges, to live together. And that became the ethos of the mandate that she gave us. It took us a while to get around it because we are not very comfortable talking about and thinking about religion and its place. We have a tendency to think that religion is best pigeonholed as FoRB and FoRB only, whereas we realize that religion and religious engagement is far more diverse, and it touches upon many aspects of everyday life, both in Europe as well as outside. And that's why, with the good help of colleagues inside the EEAS, but also in other commission DGs, as well as our partners in the Transatlantic Policy Network, we worked towards this concept that was ready for being put in the ocean in September 19. The timing with the European elections is, should I say, totally coincidental. But it is true that we had to stop and think, how do we make this ship sail from one HRVP onto the next? And that's why we were delighted to see that when HRVP designate Borrell, in his hearing debate at European Parliament, was asked about this project, and this was the only project he was asked about, responded to say, I know this, I'm aware of this, I give it my blessing. And in addition, said, this is something that I can easily devote my energy to. So we managed to hand over from one political leader to the other. So that is why, that's the overall sort of objective of the program and why it's timing. So it's really to get from the sort of generic view, which often we hear in the media, where religion is basically a negative, to get to the grassroots level and say, how can we connect those and give voice and visibility by those who live their faith in constellation with others to build bridges?
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. And it's very fitting then for Mogherini to present it just before she left office. It's great to see it growing. We as a platform, we are particularly interested in freedom of religion or belief, and you already touched upon that. But how is GERAS related to overall FoRB promotion?
So FoRB is a very fundamental policy area that GERAS touches upon. It's not the only one, but it is very important. The whole idea of how we live together, not in spite of, but because of our differences, because of our diversity, how do we manage to appreciate that, is something which is quintessential to FoRB. But contrary to FoRB, in this program, we are not so much interested in people's individual religions, more how they live their religion in society, hence the name Religion in Society, together with other civil society actors, and see how they basically achieve to solve concrete issues, not just of human rights and defense promotion of FoRB and other human rights, but also in terms of education, transitional justice, migration flows. What are the concrete examples that exist in the local context where they live? And we want to connect these local experiences in a global exchange so that we can be wiser by what happens. And if you allow, Arie, I thought I'd maybe just highlight the sort of three ways in which we intend to do so. We basically want to first connect, then share, and then scale up these experiences. So we are looking at, as you know, civil society actors, be they faith-based or not, working, as you said in the introduction, on social inclusion in religiously diverse contexts. And what we want to see is how they manage their cultural, what is their experience in managing cultural and religious diversity and promoting active, participatory and inclusive citizenship. And there again, you have the FoRB resonance. So the three ways is we want to connect people, meet from all over the world facing the same issues. These will become members of the GARES alumni. So that's the first way we will proceed. Secondly, we want every participant to bring to the table their own experience, not on behalf of someone else, but their own experience. We will make their voice heard, and while learning from others. So it's very important we have this exchange where nobody comes in and gives sort of, let alone ourselves, and tell people how they should think about these issues, but really learn from above. And the third thing is to scale up. We will offer participants training on policy and media engagement, and they will receive support to prepare micro projects, either individual and jointly. So in short, connect, share, and scale up. We're looking at about 150 participants over 2 years in 6 destinations.
Wow. Yeah, so that's really a big project. Great, good to hear that. Yeah, you're really excited about the project, right?
I am, because I think, especially working inside the institutions, it's nice to be able to walk and not just talk, but also to, it's sometimes rare. I'd say it's too rare that you see a political idea be spelled out into a concept and being carried out into reality. That's basically what we are seeing now. It's taken a while and we've not been helped by COVID, but we are now getting there. And I think why I'm really excited is also because this helps us to think in a more nuanced manner about religion, about the role of religion, that it is not our purpose to promote religion, but it's not our purpose either to put religion in a box. What we need to do is to navigate the world as is, and understand that people live their faith in different ways in constellation with other people, and to bring solutions. And it's that knowledge that we know is out there, but we haven't been putting our ears to the ground. And through this exchange, we will have a policy feedback loop up to headquarters, because admit it, we sit 30,000 feet above the ground. How do we know how it pans out in Eritrea, in Ethiopia, in Indonesia, in South Africa on item A, B, or C? Through this and through the cooperation we'll have with the consortium, we will have regular policy briefs coming up from these exchanges.
That's brilliant. That sounds very, very good, very interesting. As you said, it gives the opportunity for civil society to weigh in, to discuss, to encourage one another essentially in the long term. And as you said, through these sort of 3 overarching objectives of connecting, sharing, and scaling up. And I guess I was just wondering, in terms of getting more into the nuts and bolts of this really interesting project, I was wondering, Merete, if you could share some light on the methodology behind the setup and implementation of the global exchange. For example, how did you agree between the organizers of this project on the amount of participants, for example, or how did you identify which non-European sort of CSOs you were looking for, and from which particular countries were eligible for this project, really?
Thank you, Alessandro. Very, very good question. One of the things that we are painfully aware of when we work inside the EEAS is the shortcomings of our knowledge. So very early on in the process, we reached out to this excellent NGO in the UK called Lokahi. Lokahi is Hawaiian for living together. And we asked them to help us think along the lines that we were already sketching out. and see how could we organize this kind of model, because it's important that we have a model that can be tested against reality. And through that, and through two pilot projects that we conducted in Lebanon and in London, we found the way in which we thought was a very meaningful way to take this first step, because it's a small project compared to the amount of money that sometimes the Commission puts behind their projects, but it's also a very, very important and sensitive one. So it's one that's very important to get right, and to make sure it doesn't get shut down by those who think, we should close down on religion, or those who think we should religionize our diplomacy. So through that testing of our ideas, we got a report and an idea of what kind of numbers we were looking at to make something meaningful. And we then put the contract out for public tender, as we do inside the EU, and got a consortium that is working together. It's partnership together with Media Diversity Institute, with whom we have been looking to see how can we actually find the right people. So it was very much a collaborative approach. This consortium was not particularly, should I say, literate about our way of thinking about this. But through common help, we have used their network, their sounding out of partners, potential partners, and our own networks to make sure that we cast the net wide enough. And there is a point which is very important. This is a global project. So we pull together from all over the world, including inside Europe, but also including from the US, from Latin America, it's not just EU foreign policy, like where FoRB, we look at the plight and the state of religious freedom or freedom of religion or belief outside Europe. Here, it's also a question of a certain element of introspection. And that has been what has been so challenging and fun, is to see the enthusiasm that also has triggered among our European partners to see, hang on a minute, I would like to see what this looks like, and how can we learn from others? Because we all know that living together is an ability that we can't take for granted. We just have to watch politics, global politics today, but it's something that we need to invest in. And I think that, with hindsight, was probably the wisdom of Mogherini and of Borrell to say it's exactly this kind of targeted civil society engagement, which is not faith blind, but faith enabling, that we need. And so with the common contributions, we managed to get out into many different corners of the world. We set up an advisory board to make sure that we were not blind spotted. Very often when people talk about the Global South, they have no idea where the Global South starts or ends. So we connected with some of our colleagues who we know are very cited on this, so that we are sure we don't have any blind spot. But another thing that we did, and with hindsight, I'm so happy we did that, is that we connected with some of the best people with experience of virtual exchange. Because, just a small parenthesis, you may know that we did a trial out of Erasmus on virtual exchange, which also came about started like this kind of idea. And within the last year, we've had 18,000 people going through this, and we're now looking to see how we can extend it. So we are connecting people using the best of everybody's network.
Okay, really interesting. And my next question was going to be: have there been any concrete measurable results from the GERES project? As we found out, there's this really good video that sort of gives a bit of an idea. You're welcome to share an answer, but I can also try and share my screen, and I think it's probably best if I can attempt it and then see if the connection is good enough to do that for all participants. Otherwise, I'll just put it in the chat and we can individually watch it later. Arie, if you're able to enable me to share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Here we go. It's just a 3-minute video, just giving some examples. That's correct, Merete? Oh. There we go.
Often religion is seen as part of the problem, and we cannot deny that it is part of the problem. But then it must also be part of the solution.
People want to live together, regardless of their faith, regardless of their ethnic background.
We find out that there is more that we have in common.
There's this really strong history of acceptance and regard and respect for one another.
We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to connect those groups together, and that they can learn from each other's experiences.
In the local communities, people still live, would love to live together. Our role is to facilitate that, to support them either technically or financially so that they realize they have the potential.
I launched a Ramadan festival to bring Muslims closer to non-Muslims. We try to stimulate Muslim families not only to share with the closest friends, is to share with the whole country.
We had Christians, Yazidis, Muslims, Shia and Sunni, and Sabi and Mindayan, religious leaders and representatives just walking in silence in one of the main roads in Baghdad. People were stunned, they hadn't seen something like this.
This is a welcome church. So it's not just about refugees, and it's not just about the poor. It's about people who are on the edge in all kinds of ways. This is a safe space for them.
Our challenges are also shared somewhere else.
They brought together people from all over the world, really amazing people.
All people, regardless of their age and background, passionate about making their societies better and building trust between societies.
The problem we are experiencing in one country could also be the same elsewhere.
We had participants, from Sri Lanka to America and different European countries, and of course different Middle Eastern countries.
We got to know one another as people.
It opens doors to the world. It opens doors to other activists.
And we had very young activists and we had very old practitioners sitting around the same table discussing the same issues.
So I took some of interesting ideas from the exchange.
Being inspired and do something with it and take action.
It really did give me a boost and an energy.
You share, you care.
The more you share, the more you get.
Wonderful. That was really encouraging. I really tapped into it as well, because I know personally with my work, we work with various different communities around the world. And once we were working with a Uyghur actually here doing advocacy at the European Parliament. And I remember there was this feeling of this common bond between us, although we follow different gods, different religions. There was that common humanity which was bringing us together. So I really identified with that video, with I guess just the wider ethos around the GERES project. So I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Merete. I think the video really spoke for itself.
Well, I think so too, and that's why I wanted these 4 excellent people in their own voices to explain what was the benefit from them having been through just the pilot project that led to GERES. So I think to answer your question, yes, we have had concrete and measurable results, but it's only the beginning. And in a way, the way I see GERES is the pilot on the pilot, which I hope that in say 2-4 years from now can lead to something even more solid, even more sustainable. So I have nothing to add, but to say you better watch it again, because it's quite broken on the sound. I'm very proud of my colleagues choosing such hit music, but it's really nice to see this kind of coming together, seeing each other as a human being rather than, a human rights defender or a number in some kind of statistic about who's being, persecuted and who not.
Yes, and just on that point, I'll just share the link in the chat so participants can look at it at a later date. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, that was really inspirational. And for me, it worked quite well. So okay. I hope that was true for the audience as well. In the most recent call for application for JERIS, of which the deadline was past 12th of April, over 500 organizations registered their interest, which is a testament to its appeal, and I can understand why. Given the practical difficulties of meeting in person due to COVID-19, how do you envision the global exchange to play out as we approach the last year of the project?
Well, thank you, Arie. You put your finger on what is the real sort of operational challenge we have, because we've basically been set back by COVID, but which also means we'll do what we call a non-cost prolongation of the project. So it's going to run a bit longer. Even prior to COVID, we had thought in the virtual exchange element into the exchange, because we realized that in today's world, it's too expensive. It's often too time consuming, and it's often impractical to move people around. It's important because nothing substitutes physical exchange, going to places, visiting each other's holy sites, understanding the diversity in one country as opposed to the other. But by front loading on the virtual exchange element, we managed to have something which was halfway COVID proof, so that we will already next month, once we have given feedback on those 150 people who have been selected upon their applications, we will already then start the virtual capacity and connecting sessions as of June. Now, the idea is that we will take this group, which will be split up in 6 clusters with different themes. That's why we asked the participants to think about which are the themes that we have sort of halfway pre-identified, but we don't want to put the final ink on it, because we want participants to be able to shape it. We don't always have the answer. It's important we have a bottom-up approach, but people have sort of indicated clusters of themes, and we have paired those clusters with the 6 destinations. So just to remind the audience that the 6 destinations are Bosnia-Herzegovina, it's Indonesia, it's Morocco, South Africa, it's Brussels, and it's the US. And those 6 destinations, we will do virtual meetups before, training, capacity build. We will then hopefully get to the point where we can travel, and we hope that people's Zoom fatigue will be spilled over into a travel enthusiasm, so that people will want to get out there and meet each other and go to Morocco and see how this plays out, or go to Sarajevo and get a sense of, there's all these things happening, and, we only hear a fraction of it. And the way that history is written often is, a little bit tainted. So we need really to know our stuff. So we hope that we can get through the tail end of the sort of the confinement phase to a phase where we will be allowed to travel. We might change around that's one thing we are discussing, whether we should start. We were supposed to start with Bosnia-Herzegovina, but maybe we start with one depending on where the vaccinations are more advanced. But as it's global, it's not going to be, just Western Balkans talking to Western Balkans in Sarajevo. We're going to mix the groups. And I think that is what has really made me very, very happy, is to see that not only do we have a high number, but we have from 75 countries. And some of the countries that have taken us completely by surprise and have applied in high numbers are Syria, Nigeria, and also the diversity. I mean, from Iceland to Sri Lanka to various Southeast Asian countries, not just Indonesia, New Zealand, etc. So that we've hit a core. I mean, you never know that when you sit as a policy advisor and think you really have a great idea, whether it is actually a great idea once it hits the tarmac. But here we're like, hallelujah, we need to do more of this and quick. So we are off to a good start, a delayed start, but we will get there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Great answer. Can I just ask, because I can see a few questions trickling in from participants regarding the first question with Leonie Lewis about if we can see which participants coming from which country. I don't know, Arie, if you're able to do that. Otherwise, I think probably the best thing is to have a list at the end. We can send an email out with all the different participants, maybe. Probably that will be the best thing to do. But yes, I encourage participants to write some questions. We're coming to our last question within the panel, and then we'll open it up to a large Q&A. So on my side, I'm just going to end with one question. Lifting the quote from the GERES website is that the goal of the project, and I quote, is to contribute to social inclusion and societal resilience by setting up a global, community-based initiative to facilitate a global conversation on diversity, coexistence, and social inclusion. Now, you mentioned it at the start of this about the alumni network. How do you envision the alumni network from this project to maintain its ties beyond the project's completion in April 2022?
Very good question, and this is one that we all are quite keen to get right, because we know it's easy to do, go from event to event or project to project, but how do you carry over the networks? And that's what we saw already. I'm sorry if you can't hear me, but I have hail coming onto my windows. I can barely hear you, but anyway. We have, from the Lokahi experience, we had saw how people spontaneously put up WhatsApp groups, how they started cooperating, how Kidist, who you saw from Ethiopia, wasn't aware that people are working actually on elimination of female genital mutilation, engaging with these kind of partners, though it's not a religious issue per se, it's more cultural. And so we saw all this kind of spontaneous, let's do networking. Now, what we want to do, as other of line DGs of the Commission wants to do, is to make sure that kind of knowledge does not get lost. Now, we haven't been helped by the new data protection rules that makes life, quite frankly, insufferable, because we have to ask for permission for everything. So we have different models, and I think the project work also will help us to make sure that it becomes sustainable. I mentioned before that for me, this is only the beginning. If it was up to me, we would already now be thinking about phase 2. And we have different models for that, where we could maybe partner also with those like-minded member states to do a co-investment and do sort of, set up a not just a network, but an institution that focus on this, so that you will remember how we set up the European Institute for Peace, which was done by 8 member states and an active core inside the EEAS. Well, I can't see why we couldn't do something similar on culture and religion. And when I hear the interest that this sparks in civil society, but also in our political context with Parliament, there are different ways that we go forward. But we were going to be very terre à terre and start by making sure that the people we connect through this will stay together. And it's 2 groups, which I think is going to be very interesting. It's both civil society actors, as I told you, faith-based and non-faith-based, but also the journalistic component. And to see how they mix and connect, and how they can help each other bring forward the stories that work, the experience that matter, that we don't hear of because, mainstream media won't carry it because it doesn't have blood and drama written all over it. Whereas in fact, it brings forward what we talked about, the common humanity and how we all want to live together once you take away the tribalization that often exists on these topics.
Wonderful. Thanks, Merete.
Yeah, and no doubt your relation with the Media Diversity Institute will come in handy there as well in that follow-up phase. Yeah, let's go to the Q&A and see what kind of questions we have. If you in the audience and you still have questions, feel free to submit them using the Q&A. There's one question from India. How do you propose to connect with all those attending today's event? Well, that's a difficulty for us, but how are you? Are you still open for people to contact you to set up new initiatives?
I mean, we as both Alessandro and Arie know, the EEAS lives and breathes through its contacts and its closeness with civil society and any great ideas that's out there. So I'd be very happy if people have ideas or think that there's something that we should be considering doing, if they would get in touch. But I will leave it to EPRID to see how you connect your group. It's very interesting when we had the launch, just because the person asking the question is from India, we actually had on the panel a very impressive woman from India who was part of our pilot, who was, I think, also part of Kai Seed's fellow program. So which I mentioned to show that we managed to go to places because we use each other's help. We sort of stepstone on what other people have been doing before, and we learn from the do's and don'ts. And that's also why, those of you who know me know I like to take risks, calculated risks, not bad risks. But that's also why I think it's important that we there's no one who is ruled out in advance, and we keep a very open-minded and keep our doors open for any kind of good feedback that we can get. And we also, I'd like to say, sometimes get some flack. I probably shouldn't say that as this is a public thing, but it just amuses me how much the French just cannot have that we talk about religion. I mean, if I'd been up for some of the French, but not, I shouldn't be as generic as that, but some of the sort of very staunch laicist, they think that we are opening Pandora's box with this, and they think we are doing great harm to the Commission's neutrality. And we keep saying it's not about religion, it's not about theology, it's religion in context, not religion on pedestal. I don't know how many times I've repeated this, but you're talking to a group that just doesn't want to be convinced, a group that is very adamant that we should not be looking at this. And with these kind of people, it's very difficult to have a meaningful dialogue. But it's important we have it. And that's why, much to maybe less the amusement than the scare of some of my colleagues, I said that we need to have town hall meetings inside the EEAS on this. And I combined forces with my very good colleague, Raphael Barolin, to combine it, sort of tail-ended to some of the stuff that he's doing on FoRB more specifically. And I think it's important that we explain that, no, we can't live in a world where we just pretend that things aren't what they are. And if we ignore these things, we ignore them at our own peril, because we also need to not be blind to the fact that religion can be used for very non-faith worthy causes. And sometimes religion comes to us more as a soft power political tool and instrument, where we should be absolutely clear and say, that's very interesting, but thank you, we're not interested. And that's where, the geopolitics of religion comes in more and more. How do we manage those who want to use they're religious actors, very often in countries that don't have a lot of freedom, authoritarian regimes, and they're brought in sort of, as a PR stunt. And with the fury and the flurry of we must do more interfaith. Sometimes we have to be careful and say, stop. No, we need to make sure when things are authentic and well meant, and things that are, a smokescreen or pulling wool over our eyes. You know, why is it we have to have an interfaith conference in a country where there are no rights for the minority? I mean, is this the only? No, these are questions that need to be asked.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Gillian asked whether we can share this a link to the video, and I guess we will. It's also available on Facebook Live, so people can find the recording there as well. So if you want to share that with your colleagues, feel free to do so. Just share the link to the Facebook page where they can find the recording. I don't think we have other questions, so people are really interested, but want to share the.
I think there was just one from. There was the first question from Gillian, where she asked for the name of the UK NGO that Merete referred to. I believe it was Bukhani.
Lokahi?
No, Lokahi. Lokahi. Lokahi, yeah. And I think someone also asked me about the breakdown, and it'll go too far to talk about it here. But if I can just say generically that one of the things that I find interesting is that we have almost more non-faith among the journalists interested in this than faith-based. The diversity is amazing. We look to make sure, I mean, we don't do this because we want to be politically correct, but just because we want to have a good sense of where people come from, the project countries they come from, or which other countries are they from, and the age profile, the sex, and then this, and when these are the journalists, and when it comes to the when it comes to civil society organizations, it's almost an even breakdown between men and women, which I find interesting. Those of us who work in religious engagement are used to having this quite dominant tier of male participants. And again, on faith and non-faith, quite a lot of non-faith interest in this. So I think that also shows, there's an openness to deal with this. One of the things I'm a little bit concerned about, if I can be honest, is I would have liked to have more participants from inside Europe. I know some of you have applied, but if you're interested, let me know. But also Morocco and South Africa, we have we've had very high applications, as I said, from Syria, Nigeria, Pakistan, Tanzania, Germany too, etc. But from countries like Morocco and South Africa, for me, limited. And I don't know, I mean, Morocco, I can imagine that some of it has to maybe to do with the dialogue fatigue. I mean, it is the to-go-to country whenever it has to do with, interfaith and the Marrakesh Declaration, et cetera. But I think it's important that we make sure that we get an all-rounded group together, which I'm confident that we will. It's just me being maybe overly into the nitty-gritty of things because I want this to be great.
Yeah. Well, one question from Ada, whether we can share your contact details or contact details for Jerry's more in general. And I think that answers the question for Sylvia as well.
Yes.
So can we
share the website? Definitely. But also, if you share the call for participation, which now is passed, but in there, I believe there was also a contact, generic email contact to our consortium. So with pleasure. But it would also probably be a good idea to come back at some point in time and give you and the group a feedback on how this is going. What we expect also is that there will be an amount of reporting on this. Now, we've made it very clear that the reason why we want the journalists in is not because we want them to report nicely on our project. We want them to see how they interact with the civil society, because this is not a public diplomacy sort of, just spin the good stuff we do, but really, how do we bring these kind of stories to the front of more mainstream media? And so I expect that we will be seeing how we can lift those up and give them prominence on our website that will be featuring stories from this.
Great, thank you. I think we can share the URL in the chat if we haven't done so already. So let's take care of that. Well, there's one other question from Madeline. So, what are the biggest challenges you face or you faced when it comes to religious illiteracy in Europe, and how can they be overcome best? And that is also tapping on into your vast body of experience. So can you share a little bit on that?
Certainly. I mean, my experience goes back 16 years, and that is exceptional. Nobody is normally allowed to stay on a post for that long. So either people forget about you and you're just doing nothing and don't call attention to you, or in my case, I don't think anyone wanted my job. But I got the job because of the Danish cartoons. Remember, I'm Danish. And then I dribbled it on. And I believe in taking initiative and asking for permission rather than asking for forgiveness rather than permission. So one of the things we started doing at the tail end of our like-minded period was to see we actually all struggle with the same issues. We have limited religious literacy. We have limited understanding of how to navigate and how we should respond to these initiatives that come. Remember, this was 2006, 7, 8. So it was before the guidelines. It was before much of the policy had been developed and how to deal with radicalization, to terrorism, et cetera, et cetera. So what we did was, in addition to connecting the policy officials who deal with this, and I think Alessandro said I did so single-handedly. I'd like to say I didn't. I worked together very closely with the Swedish presidency at the time, the Austrians, and the French, who you will remember was the first member state to actually set up a religions unit, for the super duper laïque country to put a little bit of water in the altar wine is probably no coincidence. But through that, we realized that one of the things we need to do is to look at how we shape the mindset and the skill set of our fellow diplomats. And that task very much fell upon the EEAS and in large part fell upon me, because through having been in the business so long, I just know an awful lot of people. And so I developed inside the EEAS these different training modules on, we call it religion and foreign policy, but they can be on different things. It can be about religion mediation. It can be about, we will have a 2-day event end of June online on religion, human rights and gender, FoRB in trouble, we call it. Because this is really where we see the fault lines of what happens when what is a very important human right become the object of domestic political football, and how does that affect us? So, but through working on this, and one of the great things and always very rewarding is to see that our training courses sell out so quickly. I mean, we there's really a market for it. And member states have been so keen to be part of it. And we have to cap it because we need to train our own first. But we normally take, 3 or maybe 5 and 6, if I cheat a little bit, member states on. And that has created a sort of a knock-on effect with member states who then have started their own training and often ask us, me in particular, but also some of the trainers to come and do the exact same training in The Hague 2 months later, or in Vilnius, or in Prague, or in Rome, or in Vienna, where we have been. And so what we do is we sort of plant the curiosity, the seed, and show that we can. And then through the cross-training, which is one thing that has been so important, not least over the last 4 or 5 years, also with the US, because the US has been in the state we know it's been in. So to invite our US colleagues over to do this cross-training, to make them understand that when we do training, it's not just to draw more nicely within the lines, It's also to question the lines. It's also to use these occasions for sort of policy test balloons. And that has been tremendously useful. And I think it was 2018, our Secretary General all of a sudden heard of all these things. Not that we've kept her in the dark, but she's was a very busy person. And she says, this is brilliant. Why did nobody tell me? We need to do this also for the senior managers, the ambassadors, So we started putting it on the ambassadors' conference meetings. We started doing special modules where we can see this has a predominant relevance for, say, this regional cluster of ambassadors. So I think we are still not terribly literate. We know more than we used to. And when it comes to one religion in particular, there's a huge opinion mass, which is not always matched with a knowledge base. And that's something that is a problem as to how we engage with it. So, but I think by and large, we are much better. We are beyond the point where religion only means FoRB, and where FoRB only means protecting of Christian minority, and where Islam just means, we fix Islam, we fix terrorism. We're beyond those things. There's still pockets, and every time you have a crisis, you go back to very sort of knee-jerk black and white thinking. But I can tell you the desire for nuance, the desire for helping to navigate this. And that's where also I see the added value of Gareth, because it's another way of thinking about religion society. It's not just about human rights. It's not just about, how do we appease or engage, etc. It's really about how do we understand, including in our own societies, how this plays out, and how can that help us with the policy objectives that we have, all of whom are secular, for lack of a better word. So how do we promote our policy objectives, knowing that we navigate this world? And there, I think we have made quite considerable progress. And I'm very happy to see that has been picked up also by other line DGs. And we have made sure that also we involve and invite some of the good people in the European Parliament, so that we learn together and don't sort of have this idea that we are on different planets.
Yeah, well, thank you. We are cognizant of time. I think we need to slowly wrap up our conversation. It's been very engaging indeed. There are still some questions. We'll see, look for opportunities to answer these then possibly separately. Well, for us as NGO representatives, it's always been a pleasure to work with you, Merete. And it's always really helpful, the conversations with you, and we really appreciate your all the energy and the vision you bring to the debate. That's always been very helpful. So thank you for that. I understood that you are moving on. So is there anything for, a last advice for what you would like to share with the NGO participants in the call, where you think, okay, this has worked, this hasn't, so how to engage with the EEAS better to promote, freedom of religion or belief and the role of faith in society?
I think we're all in a phase where we have something to build on. We have done some lessons learned, and some have been good and some have been less good. And it's important to be honest about it. I think one of the great things that I have loved about this area, and I'm not quite gone yet, but I will move on in the summer. That's correct. Is the great and devoted people that occupy this space, and they come from different walks of life, different worldviews, and we tend to call ourselves like-minded. Very often we don't agree, but that's a plus. It's the fact that we are open to understanding how this can play a role and be respectful in the way we exchange and find ways of promoting our various policies, including, we now have this 4-year action plan on human rights and democracy, where FoRB is one of the important rights, alongside with other rights. But one of the things that I think we need to be careful about as we go forward, and you will all have seen that the Commission has just appointed their special envoy on freedom of religion and belief outside Europe, is if this can become hub for galvanizing what needs to be done more and sort of be the powerhouse of a better projection of our human rights, including FoRB, then this is great. But I think there is still a need to detribalize the approach to FoRB. There's too much mudslinging. There's too much character assassinations of those you don't agree with. And I think last year has actually been very fruitful, because when you read the Ombudswoman's ruling or opinion about how the first commission envoy conducted his business, I think there's some very valid points in there that is worth taking on, because it's not a question of either or, it's a question of how. And now that we have a decision that it will be continued, and it'll be continued in the hands of someone very capable as former Commissioner Stylianides, reporting to Skinner, it's very important that he gets the backing and gets the experience of what worked and what didn't work with the previous experience. So I think the Ombudswoman's contributions, just as well as making sure that the mandate and the modus operandi behind this become a little bit more thought through. So it's not a question of hijacking that person for one religious group's purposes, because we all know that FoRB is a human right. It's a very important human right. Contrary to the US, we don't see it as a standalone. We measure a society's well-being on different rights, not just one. But it's not to say that FoRB is the last. It's part of a parcel. And that is also what I thought was so interesting to see in the Ombudswoman's findings. And I wish the new envoy best of luck. He will work very closely with EU Special Representative on Human Rights, Eamon Gilmore, who has been my boss. And I'm sure that the two will find a way in which they can together combine their efforts to deliver on this. So I think in terms of those who navigate or gravitate around these issues, be very self-conscious about the way in which you approach this, and make sure that you do it to build inclusive and diverse societies, and not just be part of partisan, and I call it tribal, but that's because we just commissioned a paper on this. So I thought the title was fantastic, but we really need to think about, get beyond this and work together. And also, quite frankly, help our US colleagues who are now, sort of standing up and saying, hang on a minute, we used to have this policy area precisely as a bipartisan area of work. Now it's become polarized and politicized so much so that they have to go back to base and try to just make it nonpartisan to start with. Now, how do you roll it back after years of the experience we've been through, which has also affected our continent? But I'm very confident with the great people who I know are working on this field that we will be able to do that, and we will be able to show that the EU's approach, the EU's belief in multilateral frameworks, in EU's investment in civil society, of which GERS is just one of many examples, that we'll get there.
Wonderful.
Very, very
encouraging. Yeah, thank you very much, Merete. That was a nice closing of our call. Thank you very much for your time and for your candid sharing of your experience and your enthusiasm for the project. It feels like the audience agrees with you and is as excited about the project as you are. So we'll look for opportunities to get them in touch with you as well. As EPRID, it's always been a pleasure to work with you. So thank you very much, and we are looking forward to working with the new special envoy and your successor in the EEAS as well with your other colleagues. For now, we will close this webinar. Thank you very much for listening in. Thank you for being part, and thank you for your questions. It's been very informative and very interesting. Please keep an eye on our website. We try to have another one another webinar in June as well. So please keep an eye on our website. If you haven't subscribed to the mailing list, please do so. So you will stay in touch, and you will be aware of next episodes of this webinar. For now, thank you very much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you very much. Bye then.